This is a landscape that is really special to me. I've known this landscape since I was a kid, really. And when I was at art college, all my artwork came to be about slate mining and this area. And it's just been something special to me all my life, really. This is a worked landscape. Every stone that you see here has been worked by hand. The quarrymen read the rock underground. They extracted it. The good stuff went to the slate mill, was made into slates. What we're seeing here is the debris that couldn't be used. But that understanding of rock is obvious as well in the built structures all around us here, building quite ad hoc manner, but very beautiful structures, very simply. So every stone here has been touched by hand as they worked this landscape. All the good slates from the mill were stacked into wagons, packed very tightly and then lowered down the inclines here. This is the Voti incline. It leads straight down to the centre of town, and down this wagon way millions and millions of tons were shipped out by little trucks on the Ffestiniog railway down to the harbour at Porthmadog, and from there they carried slates all the way around the world. So it's this, from this point on this incline, slates started their journey that could end up in Australia even. The Ffestiniog Railway no longer carries slates, but it carries passengers. And until recently, the passengers' experience of arriving in Blaenau Ffestiniog was, well, underwhelming, to say the least. You couldn't even see the high street. There was a wall that stopped you seeing the high street. There was no enticement to come onto the high street and spend some money in the shops. And the average spend was 23 pence per person. When we undertook this town centre regeneration scheme, we did a lot of public consultation, and the clear message that came out of that was to engage with the history of the place, to celebrate the heritage, but to look to the future as well. So we've taken as our starting point the industrial heritage and the culture that came out of that, but we're looking to the future as well, because it's very important to show that Blaenau has got a new identity. It's looking to the future, and that there is lots of scope, lots of possibilities for new business here and to turn the town around. As you come off the Ffestiniog Railway now, this is your gateway experience into Blaenau Ffestiniog. This is what draws you into the high street. There are two big pillars made out of thousands of slates that double as signage leading you into the town as well. And all these sections of this sculpture and all the pillars here were made in my studio just 7 miles down the valley. Once we completed all the sections, we checked everything fitted together properly, and then when the site was ready, we took them up by lorry and we installed everything by crane. Once you've walked through the gateway, you're drawn to the centre of the town by these 4 giant pillars of slate. These are in the shape of slate splitter's chisel, but they are huge pillars, 7.5 metres high, and they're each made from about 15,000 slates that have come from the slate quarries of Blaenau Ffestiniog here. We've stacked all the slates at 30 degrees. That's because that's the angle of the slates in the beds of the slate quarries behind us here. So we've got this lovely connection going on between these very abstract pillars, the slate splitter's chisel, and then the geology of the place that's informed the whole sculpture. Embedded in all these strata are quarry sayings and poetry by poets from Blaenau Ffestiniog. This was an incredibly rich culture that worked these slate seams. The men stayed underground all day. They had Eisteddfod, cultural competitions from one caban, one workplace to another, and out of that came lots of poetry, recitations, a political awareness that was phenomenal, and an incredibly rich culture, all done in the Welsh language and all celebrated here in these bands of slate. And what I really like about it is the fact that just as these words were spoken underground and embedded in the ground, we've got these cultural and technical mining phrases embedded in our slates. This is probably my favourite one here. Codi Cerrig. It means raising stone. And that's exactly what they did in the quarries here. They brought stone up from underground, They dress the slates, they raise them up onto the bench ready for packing. But that's also what I do for a living. I make artwork that stacks stones, and I love that idea of stacking up into space, but the artwork has actually come out of that culture. So I'm raising my stones out of that culture and making new shapes within it. As you walk up between the pillars on the steps here, it's like walking out of the slate mine at the end of shift, walking up between the great columns of rock on either side of you, and entering onto the high street is that same feeling of passing a material, passing a rock, and coming into a new space. This is the River of Slate, and the river is a really good image for me here, because slate is formed by ancient river muds that got washed into oceans 450 million years ago, and then they became a sedimentary rock and then a metamorphic rock as pressure and heat changed it and became the slate that we know today. But the river is also a really good image as well, because before the Ffestiniog railway carried slates down to Porthmadog harbour, the slates were taken by pack horse and cart down to little quaysides on the river, on the Afon Dyrid, down the valley, and taken out on little boats to meet bigger ships in Porthmadog Bay. On either side of the river we've got a line of poetry. We've got a band on one side in English and a band in Welsh, and both pieces are written by Gwyn Thomas, a poet and professor of Welsh from Blaenau here. In Welsh it says, "Llyfr amser yn ein flaen, a llyfr dŵr, ni llyfr bwyd cregiwr," which means time flows on and water too, but not the life of a rockman. I think it's very important to acknowledge that it was a very hard life in the slate quarries. It could be easy to romanticise them. In English, he wrote, "Men die, the rocks in the empty darkness of these mountains endure." This is a celebration of the over 350 slate quarries that there were operating at one time in Wales. What we've done is we've engraved the name of every slate quarry on the appropriate colour of rock for that area. Got purples from Llanberis and Bethesda, we've got blue-grey from Ffestiniog here, then amazingly rich colours from Pembrokeshire, where you get into Silurian slates, and you get browns and purples and greens all mixed together. And what it is for me is it's a celebration of all that diversity of slates, all different colours, but it's also a reminder that men worked in very harsh conditions in all these slate quarries across the whole of Wales. This might look like just a toilet in the middle of a car park, but this is not just any old toilet at all. This has been fantastically renovated, and it used to be the station building. This used to be a hive of activity. There were slate wagons coming and going, and the station building was the focal point for all that. Embedded in the paving are strips of slate, and they've placed the same distance apart as the little railway tracks that once ran across the site here. And resting on these tracks, we've got benches carefully placed to look like slate wagons that once carried the slates right away across the site to Porthmadog. Each bench is inspired by the slate trucks, but it's also inspired by what was called a block of 8, because that's about 2.5-inch thick piece of slate that the slate men took and then split in half, and then in half, and half again. So out of one block they got 8. Packed tightly between the pieces of oak, we've got slates packed in really densely, just as they were packed really carefully for their journey in the slate trucks. I was really keen to incorporate details in this scheme as well. Not just have big things, but have lots of little details that you could discover as time went by. Here in the bus shelters, we've got the names of all the different sizes of slates that were produced in the quarries. This was a bit of a marketing device invented in the early Victorian times. They took the name of each slate and gave it the name of a member of the female aristocracy. So you go from ladies all the way through to countesses to princesses and queens. There were variations on these sizes as well, so you get things like narrow ladies or wide countesses, and I really like that image of as you wait in your bus shelter in Blaenau Ffestiniog, you can ponder the different sizes of aristocracy. I've worked in public art for something like 30 years, but this has to be my ultimate project. I've been fascinated by slate quarries since I was a teenager. I've lived in this area for the last 40 years. This place just means so much to me. So to be given the chance to celebrate the heritage, the industrial archaeology and the culture of Blaenau Ffestiniog has been, I've got to say, it's just an absolute honour, really, a complete privilege. And for me as an artist, to be given that freedom to develop my ideas and to create this new town centre has been fantastic. And the other thing is, the whole regeneration scheme, all the artworks and the whole town centre improvements are making a real difference. Blaenau is a changed place now. It's got its heart back, it's got an economic optimism that wasn't there before, and it's got a buzz about it. Blaenau's actually going places now.